When Trump announced this week that he was going to be doing a surge into American cities, we didn't necessarily know exactly what he meant by that. Obviously, there's a lot of his contractors, his mercenaries, his whatever in Portland, and they were going to be going to Chicago. But when he says surge, he's not just using like the terminology that we used when sending more troops to Iraq. He's talking about levels of additional soldiers on the streets of American cities that basically we had in Iraq.
We'll go into all of the cities, any of the cities we're ready. We'll put in 50,000, 60,000 people that really know what they're doing, and they're strong, they're tough, and we could solve these problems so fast. But as you know, we have to be invited in. If they invited us in, we'd go in with 50,000, 75,000 people. We would be able to solve it like you wouldn't believe and quick. But they just don't want to ask, maybe for political reasons, but they don't want to ask. It's a disgrace.
So he says there a couple times he has to be invited in, which makes me glad because that's not what he's been saying this whole week. And in fact, they don't want him in the cities he's already in.
But also, he's describing his forces as though they're a vampire.
Describe
right?
For me. What do you mean?
Aren't those the rules? Let the right one in? Like a vampire can't come into your house unless you invite them in?
If only the mayor of Chicago would let us in and maybe take all their garlic for the pizza and put it outside.
I don't want to suck your blood, just me. Secret bill is interesting way of putting it. I'm thirsty. I want water.
Okay. That is a funny observation. There, though, he is saying 50 to 60,000 people, cops, mercenaries,
and
not
just that,
contractors.
They literally use the term surge
mm-hmm.
because it worked in Iraq.
Yeah. Let's talk about what that would actually represent. So, in theory, DHS has 240,000 total employees of all varieties, and as of 2016, the agency employed roughly 62,000 full-time law enforcement officers. That is 38,000 for CBP, 12,000 ICE officers, you got 5,000 Secret Service agents, and nearly 1,000 Federal Protection Service agents. There's an additional 44,000 in the FBI, the ATF, and the DEA. So that would be effectively taking all of Border Patrol, all of ICE, all of Secret Service, and then drawing from the ATF and the FBI, and then sending them all over. Which is obviously insane and couldn't happen, and conservatives wouldn't even support taking ICE and CBP to do that. Which then begs the question, well then who will they be sending? Because they're clearly not going to send every FBI official to these cities. What it means is they're going to be hiring more contractors, which is a really nice gussied up way of saying mercenaries. They're going to be hiring mercenaries and they're going to be dispatching, and he is going to be choosing them to be what two characteristics did he say in that video? Strong and tough. He's going to be hiring mercenaries to go in American streets and brutalize protesters and be strong and tough.
And there's so much happening. There's so much to this. So on the one hand, you have he says where they're not doing it for political reasons. Okay, fine. What political reasons? Those are already lost political causes. Like city politics is already lost political cause for Trump, period. So it's not like they're going to alienate the elected officials any more than they are by an ongoing crisis. It's going to make it worse. But the villain in all of this is still going to be Trump on those local races.
Yeah.
Not to mention the general failure he's having. But just from a strategic perspective, in states that might be toss-ups, this is really horrifying. In states that might be toss-ups, if Trump can neutralize the vote in the cities, then he could potentially win those states. And one way that we hear of in failed states, many for whatever reason failed states, is that the central government puts essentially like a barricade around the polls and won't let people vote.
Yeah.
And his actions are consistent with that strategy. Now, even Mitch McConnell's looking around and going like, man, we can do this on paper. I'm not sure we need to actually send troops. Mm-hmm. And that's what he's been trying to do and succeeding in doing for years. Trump is explicitly sending troops, federal troops to cities to do what? Well, the original reason that he put out for it was there's protests in Portland that are getting too violent. So I need to protect the federal buildings And Chad Wolf says, well, that is under our jurisdiction to protect the federal buildings. Now, typically the people protecting federal buildings on behalf of the federal government are like Smithsonian guards.
Yeah.
They have short sleeve, like, white uniforms. You know what I mean? Like, it's the short sleeved police. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Here he's sending other folks to go in and physically make that happen. And it's really, really terrifying. But shift to the next move that he made, which is in Albuquerque and Chicago. All pretense of protecting federal buildings is gone.
Yeah.
Now he wants to help with the murder rate. Well, murder is not that kind of crime. There are police officers to handle murder, and this is definitely not the kind of thing that will cut down on murders. He wants to eliminate the federal system. He wants to eliminate federalism.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so ridiculously, hilariously ironic from a Republican president. A Republican president who should say, handle it yourselves.
Yeah.
That's what they always say. The funny, hilarious thing that Republicans always say is like, I shouldn't have a job to do. You do it. But instead, he is going and invading cities for political reasons and just straight up narcissism.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess the silver lining is if they're going in to stop the murders, then the only thing we have to do to get rid of them is just not have crimes anymore. And then they'll all go. And then we'll be great. Yay.
But the way he's doing that is something that should, like, every QAnon person should be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is what Q warned us about.
He wished best wishes to Jeffrey Epstein's groomer and fellow criminal. And they got past that man without skipping a beat. They figured out all these ways that actually confirms everything Q has said. On One American News, I almost made it a story. One American News, they went on this long rant about Twitch banning QAnon accounts. And then they said, this is One American News. It's like next up to Fox. It's the conservative media. They're like, no. Q is the new normal. It's the new mainstream. Everyone has caught on to how much Q has actually taught us and has correctly predicted. This is not like 4chan. This is his apparently favorite media outlet after Fox.
Of course it would be. No one knows how to watch that.
That's true. I don't know either. Yeah, and so like they got to do something about this because honestly, we still don't know who these people are necessarily. There have been particular people, like one of the mercenaries had his face shown. He had apparently like brutally beaten some people, and so they were asking for him to be identified because they wanted to press charges. These protesters, and the authorities were like, no, we're not telling you who this is. I guess there's just no accountability for these. Remember, like, there were the cops that, like, pushed over that activist and cracked his skull open?
Mm-hmm.
We found out who those cops were. Not these. These mercenaries are anonymous. Whether their faces are covered or not, and the vast majority are, and they're all wearing camo, even though they're in an urban setting, and it's not urban camo, no, you don't get to know who they are, and you better not follow them.
Right. So to bring it back to the video you played about the Gestapo ad, like that stuff's wildly in context. All that footage, it happened.
Yeah.
All the points being made are accurate.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.